This first story is a little different from all the others that I've done because this actually happened to me. There's a few things that I've experienced that would suit this channel. I might do those another time, but I don't like talking about myself that much. Anyways, here it is. In 2015, I made a life-changing decision to quit my job and teach English in China for a year. I had zero experience as a teacher and zero experience living in a foreign country, but none of that mattered. I was extremely burnt out with my job. I was over it and needed a change. My friends thought I was crazy, and maybe I was, but working the standard 9 to 5 for years on end can make you do things you normally wouldn't. I already had a few schools lined up that I would visit and showed off my quote-unquote teaching skills and worked out a 1-year contract. Those schools were located in southern mainland China. I would be flying into Hong Kong and then take a bus into China a few days after my visa was situated. Keeping up with the theme of things I've never done before, I booked an AirBnB for the first time. I didn't do much research, but it was the cheapest I could find. I wasn't able to afford much. It was in an apartment in a 15-story complex. I met the owner of the apartment at my train stop. Her name was Vivi, very nice and helpful, telling me about the city and things nearby where I would be staying. It was a very small 3-bedroom apartment with one tiny bedroom near the front door to myself. I would be sharing a bathroom with Vivi, her 10-year-old son, and another lady that rented one of the rooms that I never met. Not an ideal situation for 3 nights, but like I said, I couldn't afford a whole lot. The first night I arrived late, so I stayed in my room and went straight to bed. The next day I was out and about in the city, soaking up the culture shock. Experiencing a whole new country and way of life is so exciting. It kind of feels like a low dose of adrenaline is constantly pumping through your body. Once the sun set, I went back to the apartment and to my bedroom. I didn't see anyone home when I walked in. I was a little relieved because having 3 strangers as roommates for a couple days feels awkward to me. I brushed my teeth and easily fell asleep around 9 p.m. But at 1 in the morning, I was awoke by a man yelling. He was saying something over and over again. Because it was in Chinese, I had no idea what it meant. I also couldn't tell exactly where it was coming from. Maybe it was from another apartment because all the residents seemed to be packed in there like sardines. But that turned out to not be true because I now hear a loud banging on the front door to the apartment. Again, my room is directly next to the front door. And forget trying to sleep through this. I'm worried who the hell this is and does he belong here? I thought for sure Vivi would wake up and sort this all out, but that never happened. After 20 minutes of pounding and banging on the locked door, I hear it break open. This man broke down the door, and now I hear him even louder because he's 7 feet away from me. But here was the good news, maybe my saving grace. On all the apartments, there is a wooden door, but also a metal cage type like door on the outside, like this. He somehow busted open the wooden door, using something to go through the gap between the bars. He still had to get through a metal cage if he was going to make his way inside. This whole time I had no idea what his intentions were. I thought if I wanted to see what was going on, I might only make him more angry and possibly direct his anger towards me. And it's not like I could calm him down. I only learned how to say ni hao just yesterday. So I stayed in the room hoping he will go away. And for 5 minutes I heard silence. Maybe it was over. Maybe he gave up. But that's when the scariest part of this ordeal happened. Breaking the silence was the sound of a power saw. Oh shit. No way. I decide to get a little brave and slightly crack my door and see if this is for real. Without him noticing, I get a glimpse of him. Mid-40s I'm guessing, holding a power saw against the metal door, sparks flying everywhere. I close the door and now start to panic. If he makes it in, he could decide to use that on me. I get to my phone where there's only Wi-Fi from the apartment. I couldn't make any calls with it here in Hong Kong, so I begin to Google how to dial 911 in Hong Kong. I'm guessing 911 isn't the number they use. I try to search for the police any way I can. Some of the sites I click on are in Chinese. I'm feeling hopeless. I have no way to call for help, and there is a crazy man trying to break in with a deadly weapon. I put my phone down and stand behind my door. As I hear the loud buzz of the saw on the metal, I'm coming up with a plan. If he gets in and opens my door, I'll be waiting for the perfect time to smash the door on him, giving me just enough time to run out the front door. But thank God, it never came to that. 20 minutes goes by and I never heard him or the saw. I start to relax a little. An hour passes and I lay down on my bed, feeling almost at ease now. I still didn't open my door. I eventually fell to sleep and woke up at 9 in the morning. I was hungry at this point. Feeling the coast is clear, I open my door and I see the wooden door lock busted off, and the metal door had one piece sawed in half, one part bent back, and another bar was halfway sawed through. On the ground in front of the door is an extremely dull circular blade. Well, there was the reason things didn't get worse. Strong metal and a weak saw blade. I walked out, stepping over the mess, and got breakfast. When I returned, Vivi was there. She came to me saying how sorry she was. She wasn't home last night and didn't know about it. I asked what the hell happened. She said it was her ex-husband. He sometimes gets drunk and tries to come in, but has never taken it this far. It turns out her son and roommate weren't too concerned about it because they were used to it. I felt bad for the kid. I brushed off the whole incident because she apologized profusely. The last remaining night, there were no issues. I really never blamed her for any of it, so I didn't think leaving a bad review was necessary. I thanked Vivi for her hospitality and continued my journey. It wasn't until earlier this year I used AirBnB again, and it was a much better experience. My boyfriend and I are both in our mid-30s and no kids, and decided to take a week off our hectic jobs and get the hell away. We both wanted some seclusion, the opposite of where we lived, which is the city. We both agreed to rent a cabin for a week in Pennsylvania. It was in the woods, but not too deep in the woods. It was 30 minutes from a grocery store and had Wi-Fi and all. I liked the idea of being totally isolated, but being a city girl, I needed to work my way up to that. After a 4-hour car ride, we arrived to our cabin. It wasn't very big, but it was perfect. Not having neighbors and waking up in the middle of nature is exactly what I wanted. There was a lake that was only 20 minutes walking distance, and other hiking trails around us. We both bought fishing equipment specifically for this trip. To be honest, we didn't know what we were doing. I felt like a poser. We were posers. But I like to try new things. And guess what? We didn't catch anything. On the 4th day, we arrived back to the cabin after a long hike just before sundown. I noticed right when we walked in there was a hint of a foul odor. I asked my boyfriend if he smelled anything. He said no, thinking it might be our leftover breakfast that we left in the sink. I brushed it off. The next morning we got up early because we made plans to visit a winery. I was a little perplexed because before we left, I could still smell the odor. I disposed of all our food as well, and it still lingered. We left at 8 in the morning and didn't get back until 8 at night. I was the first one to walk into the cabin, and now the thing I smelled before was twice as bad. We didn't leave anything out to spoil or rotten, and this smelled like death. When my boyfriend walked through the door, I didn't say anything. I just waited for his reaction, but he didn't flinch. When I asked him how he couldn't smell that, he blamed his allergies. For me, the smell was so strong, I thought of finding a different place to stay that night. My boyfriend told me that I'll get used to it, and then it won't bother me. For some reason, I went along with it and tried to ignore it. I didn't want to be the person that complained too much. When we went to bed, the smell didn't seem as bad, but before I could doze off, I could hear what sounded like was a scratching noise inside the cabin. After the smell and now this noise, there was no chance I was going back to bed. My boyfriend's still asleep. I start tiptoeing around the place to figure out where the noise is coming from. I seem to be getting closer to the scratching sound, and the smell is getting stronger. I find myself all the way near the front door. The smell and the scratching sound have got to be right next to me. I open up the closet near the front entrance. I look down, and there's a latch on the floor that leads to what I'm guessing is a crawl space of some kind. I'm too scared to do it myself. I wake him up and ask him to do it. He reluctantly gets up, and I direct him to the door. I ask him, "You hear and smell that now?" "Yes," he replies. I turn on the flashlight on my phone and shine it at the latch. My boyfriend yanks the latch up, and my light shines on a rotting raccoon carcass with what seemed like 100 rats feasting on its dissolving flesh and fur. Rats and flies scurry as they were disrupted by us discovering it. The stench hit us like a Mack truck. My boyfriend got the worst of it and threw up as he slammed the latch down. Flies made their way into the cabin. Horrified and disgusted aren't enough to describe how I felt. We quickly packed up our belongings and got the hell out of there. We notified the owner of the problem, and they were extremely apologetic. This was something that really wasn't their fault, so I wasn't too angry. The raccoon must have found its way into the crawl space underneath the house, and there was no way of knowing about it until it was rotting. We were later refunded the remaining nights. I didn't want to leave a bad review and ruin their entire Airbnb altogether. I know a lot of people might not think my story was a big deal, but the build-up suspense before opening the door to under the house made seeing that dead raccoon the scariest split second of my life. My wife and I and our 7-year-old daughter flew out for a family reunion in Bend, Oregon. It was my wife's side of the family. I wasn't too thrilled about it, but I forced myself to make the best of it. Part of that was booking a really nice Airbnb house for the 3 of us. 2-story, 3-bedroom, lots of room for us to enjoy. Way better than a cramped hotel room. The house I booked was sort of at a resort village type place. The area where we stayed, the homes were attached to each other in pairs. A little different than what I'm used to here in Texas, but I got over the close proximity quickly. The home was even nicer than the photos. The town itself was gorgeous, and we were near a small hiking trail that we would later use that overlooked an amazing view of mountain ranges. This part of the country was truly amazing. As we were moving all our bags from the rental car to the house, a man from the adjoined home came out to greet us. He introduced himself as Charlie. Charlie was a nice elderly man, at least in his 80s. We made small talk for a while about the area and fun things to do. The conversation ended with Charlie saying if we needed any help or have any questions, just knock. It's just me and my wife in here. I appreciated the hospitality and continued to settle in, and also get ready to meet some of my wife's extended family later that night. After 3 to 4 hours being around people I didn't want to meet in the first place, I was exhausted. We got back to the house at 11:30 p.m. My wife and kid were tired as well. They both went to bed, but I decided to wind down first by watching a little TV in the living room. I had the volume low to allow the 2 of them to sleep. Almost immediately as I sat down, I heard angry yelling coming through the wall. A woman shouting. I couldn't understand what was being said, but she was furious. I then started to hear glass shatter. A total of 3 loud explosions of glass, followed by even more yelling. I'm not the type to intervene, but I felt like I had to go over there and check in on Charlie. I knocked on the front door, and a woman answered. She appeared to be in her 50s and extremely intoxicated. I asked her if everything was okay because I heard yelling and glass breaking. She assured me that everything was fine with a few slurred words. She only opened the door about a foot, so I couldn't see much into the house. I asked how Charlie was doing, and she assured me he was fine, upstairs sleeping. I didn't press the issue any more than that. I left and said, "Have a good night," but I told myself if I heard any more, I would call the cops. I sat back down on the couch and listened carefully for any more noise coming from Charlie's house, but I didn't hear a peep. I must have fallen asleep on the couch, and was awoken by a loud bang on the front door. Quick, loud, frantic knocking. I cautiously walk to the door, look through the peephole, and it's Charlie. I open the door, and there's blood coming down the entire left side of his face. Before I can say a word, he tells me he needs a ride to the hospital now. He doesn't know where his keys are, and his wife has locked herself inside one of their bathrooms. I run to get him a towel to stop the bleeding. A deep cut on his forehead and above his ear. I wake up my wife and daughter and make them come with us to the hospital just in case Charlie's wife comes over looking for him. After we are all in the car and the initial shock of everything wears off, I asked what happened. He tells me that his wife tends to be violent and angry when she's drinking. She was throwing glasses around the house, and one of them hit him in the head. This was shocking to hear. He was such a nice guy. Not only did he not deserve it, he was so nice despite his wife abusing him. Once we got to the hospital, my wife and I walked him in. My main reason for walking him in wasn't to make sure he received treatment, but rather that he report this to the police. I wasn't leaving until he did. If he didn't, I would. No one should be getting away with this. After they stitched Charlie up, he said he would be staying in a hotel for a few days until this gets situated. I happily drove him there. Before leaving the car, he thanked me. I told him to take care of himself, and that was the last time we saw each other. We stayed at the house for another 2 days and never crossed paths with the wife. A woman that decides to bust open the head of an 80-year-old man should never get away with it.